What's up everyone? If you have your first triathlon coming up, stick around because I'm going to rapid fire off 10 tips starting the day before your first race, getting you all the way through to the finish. It's going to be a dandy. Now I'm going to start off by saying that we are going to be assuming here that you are starting your first race with either a sprint or an Olympic distance race. I'm not saying that you can't do an Ironman for your first race, I'm just saying you shouldn't. Tip number one is that you need to start fueling, as in eating a lot more, the day before the race so that you're topped up during that race. You don't need to go crazy on this, and I'm actually going to put a link up here and in the description below for a full video that I did for the entire 24 hours leading up to your race. All you need to do is start adding on, say, about 10 to 20% more carbs in maybe the morning, the afternoon, and evening. You don't need to eat a lot before your race. Just eat a little bit more. Second tip is that your morning meal before a race should be about 4 hours before the start of the race. If you're going off at 8 a.m., you should probably get up really early and eat that last meal at 4 a.m. Make that meal light, not fatty, not greasy, no fiber, if you catch my drift. Nothing new, nothing heavy. You just want to get your stomach settled a little bit with a light carb meal. Number three, you're probably going to be pretty nervous for your first race. So don't drink just because you're nervous and you've got energy with your hands and you want to sip on something. You actually just want to sip on maybe at max 12 ounces of a very light electrolyte fluid, because you should have done the majority of your salt loading and your carb loading the day before. It's not the morning of or just before the race. You want to keep your stomach very light in the few hours leading up to your race. So just sip on water and almost hold back. The fourth tip is that once you set your bike up, map out the transition area. Make note of where the entry and the exit is in the transition area, and make a note of how many rows in your bike is and how far down in that row it is. So you've got a good sense of where you need to go, and even walk it before the race so that you're not lost in looking for your bike. You can lose minutes of time doing that. A bit of a pro tip is to set up your bike next to a really noticeable bike. Maybe it's a really bright bike, maybe it's a really expensive bike. Find a bike that catches your eye and look for that bike. The fifth tip is to mentally rehearse the order of transition 1 and transition 2, so that when you get in, you think to yourself, glasses, helmet, clip your shoes in, and you think through that order of what you need to do, because when you get into that transition, your mind's gonna be racing, you've got a lot of things going on, people yelling at you, telling you to do well, and that you're doing great, all that stuff. But you want to get that plan of how the order is going to be when you get to your bike before you get into that transition. The sixth tip is to not just stand there. You want to warm up after you've got your transition area all laid out. Ideally, it's in reverse order. So go for a run with a few sprints to get your heart rate up, then hop onto the bike, same sort of thing, very short bike with just a couple short sprints, and then get into your swim gear, go down to the water, and ideally in the few minutes leading up to your race, you're doing a couple short sprints in the water and getting your heart rate pretty close to what it's going to be for. A good barometer would be like a comfortable run type of heart rate. The seventh tip is to swim smart. Unless you're a former pro water polo player, you're gonna get knocked around a hell of a lot in the swim. You're better off to actually go faster by going off to the side or even letting people swim out way ahead of you and not worrying about getting into that washing machine and getting knocked around. Especially if you're nervous before the swim, your heart rate is gonna be through the roof, and as soon as you get dunked, there's gonna be trouble. So stay out of that churn and make sure that you're able to swim your own race. It'll probably make you faster and you'll have a more enjoyable experience. Tip number 8, don't eat in transition. Just don't. There's no reason for it. You got a lot to worry about in transition, so hop onto the bike, wait about 10 minutes until your heart rate settles in, and then start eating a little bit slowly. Do it gradually throughout the bike and then stop eating in the last 10 minutes of the bike. Again, do the same thing when you get onto the run, let your stomach settle in the 10 minutes after you get off the run, and then start eating slowly. You don't have to rush it. It's a long day. The ninth tip is to be smart on the bike. Just like in the swim, going slower almost makes you faster, because a slow bike and a fast bike is probably different by about 5 minutes. But if you kill yourself on that bike and you have a tough run, the difference between a slow run and a fast run is probably a half an hour. So save your legs, do yourself a favor, and go easy on that bike. The 10th and final tip is to ease into that run. You are going to want to go off and go crazy when you hop off the bike. Little tip for you, it isn't going to be pleasant. And if you go hard in that first 5 or 10 minutes because everyone's cheering you on in transition 2, Your legs are gonna lock up and you're gonna be walking for a lot of that run. That does not make for a very pleasant first experience in triathlon. So go very easy in the first couple of kilometers until your legs settle in and your stomach settles in. Beyond that, it's gonna be the first time in the race that there's actually blood that has to go into your legs to hold up your body. So there is a lot for your body to settle into. Take it easy, and don't be a hero, because you're not gonna look very tough if you're limping over the finish line. There you have it. There are 10 quick tips for your very first triathlon. If this is the year that this is your first triathlon season, very jacked up for you. It is a fantastic sport once you get into the whole culture of it. It's something that you can do for your whole life. So make sure that that first race is an enjoyable one and you wanna keep going for years to come. Have an excellent race and happy training. Kill that next day race of yours.